Thank you everyone for coming to our more and more winter pruning class. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for being here. um, we originally scheduled this class for a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately the ice storm came and we weren't able to have it then, but it made this class even more useful to us. So we are going to go over lots of different aspects of pruning. It is a science and an art, and I'm not great at either, but I really love pruning. So we're going to go over how to make a proper horticultural cut, and then I'll show you some different pruning techniques, like for opening up and taking care of your plants to help them become the best plant they can. First of all, I want to go over some tools with you. Um, I am not a fan of mechanical trimmers. Um, they make it much more fast, and you can get, a nice clean hedge, but they rip and tear the end of the stem as they're pruning. So it's not a clean cut. There's much more surface area for diseases and pests to get in there and cause problems. So I do not recommend using mechanical shears. But I know that a lot of people do, and I'm not going to get mad at anybody who does. So, but some of my favorite things, starting off small, Joyce chin scissors. We don't have these at the store currently, but I am going to ask that we start carrying these again because they're just fantastic. I've had these for years now. I never sharpen them, and they always cut everything. I can even cut floral wire in the store. I can cut, up to like a half-inch thick branch with these. It's not the cleanest cut, but I can do it in a pinch. Um, those are Joyce chin scissors. Um, I know I got a couple pairs on Amazon a few years ago, but my original ones I got at a garden center back in North Carolina, and I had those for 18 years before I finally either lost them, or I must have lost them because I wouldn't throw them away. I would resharpen them. So, and then next up is Felcos. They have several different styles of Felcos, and really like any kind of hand pruner like this, there's either going to be a bypass pruner or an anvil pruner. The bypass actually goes past the other edge, and you can see how the blade continues on. An anvil pruner would stop dead on this other plate, and so it would be like coming down hard, and that will sometimes crush the stems rather than making a clean cut. So again, I prefer the bypass pruner over something that's going to make more of a crushing motion. Um, Again, personal preference, but it does make a cleaner cut. It's better for the plants in the long run. Next, I always, when I'm out in my yard doing work, I always have a pruning saw with me. This one's kind of a short blade. I tend to like a longer blade because I can really get into some small trees if I do that. But this I use for a little bit larger branches, something, a few inches, because the bypass pruners aren't going to quite make that. But these are fantastic. They make quick work of whatever I'm trying to cut up. And then big loppers. Again, this is a bypass pruner. This just, with the extended handle, gives me a little more leverage and a little bit more reach on whatever I'm trying to get at. And then lastly, the shears. I just call them, these are called Hedge shears. But these will give you more, like, it's easier to tell where you're making a cut with these, so that you get, especially if you are shearing something, you get a nice rounded look or a nice flat look without having to cut each individual branch and try to get that level in there. Again, bypass pruners, so it's going to make that cleaner cut. We like that. And you can tell these have been used a lot here. So azaleas, those I like to leave as a natural shape, and a lot of this is personal preference. I have seen them kept as like a rounded mound shape, and that's fine, but I think a natural shape is better. So I'll be showing that in a few minutes of just like kind of picking and choosing to reduce size overall. Let's talk about, since you brought up azaleas, let's do the yew first, because this will be the same kind of concept. A lot of times you see yews kept as like this perfectly rounded or boxed off shape. Again, not my favorite, so I tend to prune to open them up more and let in some light into the interior, and that helps regenerate growth from the interior, especially if shrubs are starting to be dead inside. This will help with that. And I just don't like the really blunt ends. On this one, you can see there's like a really jagged cut on here and just like a whole collection of blunt end stems. So let's just go in and piece this. So a good horticultural cut is, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but this is the way my brain works. But you want to do just one clean cut if possible. You're trying not to damage or mar the bark in and around the cut, and then also at a slight angle so that water will run off of that and evaporate off of that cut and not sit there and collect little fungal spores to start causing problems. All right. Yes, ma'am. I have a lot of views and trying to do it that way, but overall they've gotten too high. Mm-hmm. And so you just have to live with it until you have cut those individual ones and it starts coming down to a shorter height. Not necessarily. Yeah. So usually we recommend taking no more than a third off of the whole plant. So if you're looking at it and it's this tall, you don't want to go any lower than this, but I'd even go back halfway. So yes, it may take a year or two to really reduce it to the size you'd like it to be, and where it's easier to maintain. But I think you can take maybe up to half of the plant off at one time. Right. Chopped on it. Yeah. When my husband and I first moved here, we were offered some yews from a lady that I met here, and we went over and dug them up, and she had a densiformis yew like this that's supposed to be 5 to 6 feet tall, and she had kept it as this little tiny pancake shape, very closely pruned, and that's her style. So like that was perfect in her landscape. Well, we got them home and we just let them go. We didn't touch them for 2 or 3 years, and now they're about this tall and 6 or 8 feet wide, and I'm like, I love this. This is exactly what I wanted. So yes, you can. I mean, a lot of these plants will take shearing, but it's not their natural form, so it's not really where they want to be, and you end up pruning a lot more to keep them into a smaller shape. When we would recommend just buying, the correct plant for the right space. So that took off that kind of boxy top, and it's starting to loosen up. So I would let this grow out another year and then go in and do some more piecing. But if you want to get really dramatic, and Duncan, I'll buy this plant. So like the back is still really full. After we let those grow out for a couple of years, they still had an odd shape to them. So we went in and like really took out some big chunks. And that, again, like I was saying earlier, it brings in more sunshine into the center of the plant, activates the, for lack of a better term, the brain of the plant, and says, hey, we just lost a whole bunch and we need to regenerate that. So then it starts filling out. So now we've gone from this solid mass of stuff to this really loose and airy plant that now can take on a more natural form and kind of enjoy life again. I'm going to do one more big one. So that's how to really open up a yew if you're not scared. Okay, so let's talk about being scared to prune. Um, don't be scared. These plants, it's like giving them a haircut. You might make a miscut, but within a year or two, they're going to fill back in, and you won't notice that there was ever a mistake made. And you can also make a few more cuts along the way to even things out so it doesn't look so dramatic. And I'll show you that on some Japanese maples in a few minutes. So another big one that always gets sheared are the boxwoods. And this one in particular, we got this in late in the season last year. It had some new growth, so that immediately got fried by whatever frost we had. So that's where we've got this dead stuff on the tops. So I will go ahead and give this a nice rounded shape. So we're just going to come in and go, I like to go around the sides first. I would wait a little bit longer on boxwoods and evergreens until we start getting some warmer night temperatures, because we don't want the same thing to happen. Whenever we make a cut, it wants to wake up and start growing again. So we don't want it to get new growth and then have another freeze or something where I would, yeah, or pretty close to it. We just don't want it to have a lot of time to get new growth and then get bit by a frost. Okay. So there we go. That turned out pretty nice and round and just took off that top layer of dead. But there again, if you wanted a more natural looking boxwood, you could do something similar as the yew and go in and cut out chunks and let it regenerate all of that and just take on a more natural form. But the boxwoods are pretty easy. They don't mind being sheared. They almost perform better when they're sheared. But they are one that will get dead inside if they get a lot of brown stems inside. They lose their inner leaves. So taking those chunks out allows that light to penetrate back in there and rejuvenate the whole plant. Okay. And since we're on shrubs, let's do hydrangeas, because hydrangeas are everybody's big question every year. And I had the guys bring in one of each group of hydrangeas. So we've got a paniculata, like a limelight type. We have a macrophylla, the big pink and blue ones, and an oak leaf, and then an arborescens, which is like the Annabelle styles. So I'll start with Annabelle. The Annabelles bloom mostly on new wood. And let's see, they get a lot of dead wood through the winter. So like a lot of that will just kind of flake off. There is one lady that works here that recommends that you just cut them almost down to the ground every year and they rejuvenate from that. I'm not that drastic. But along the stems, you can see these nice big fat buds that are starting to form. Can you guys see that? Those are where the leaves are going to come out and form new stems. So again, a good horticultural cut, you want to go right above one of those. You don't want to leave a lot of dead wood. So if you cut just below the last set of buds, then you've got all this space, the node in between those two, that eventually will just die and be dead wood on the plant. That's just another invitation for pest and disease to show up and start causing problems. So we always want to go just above a node and do a slight angle. This one I am going to thin out a little bit. There's some definite crossing branches down here, and that one is even rubbing on the stem. Let me bring this around. Well, let me bring the plant. Okay, so the Annabelle types like to be cut during the winter since they do bloom on new wood. But the other types we'll talk about as we get around to them. I would do the other hydrangeas more in the fall. Yes. So that stem was rubbing right here, and you can see how the bark's a different color. So that is starting to cause damage and can cause a little spot where, again, pest and disease can get in there really easily because it's softer bark and much more susceptible to problems. So we always want to remove crossing branches and rubbing branches especially. Okay, so plants that bloom on new growths are generally ones that bloom during the summer because they have to put out that flush of growth, then the buds form on that flush of growth. So things like your spireas, some of the spireas, the more little buttony shaped ones like the cotton candy and candy corn and those. What's another good one? Roses are typically new growth bloomers because they bloom later in the summer. Butterfly bushes. What else? There's others.
And by summer, you mean like the heat of
June, July. Yeah. So our spring bloomers, a lot of the viburnums, azaleas, some of the hydrangeas, they are more old growth bloomers on last year's wood. So whatever the flower bud DNA protocols, whatever you want to call it, are already set in these flower buds for next year. All the information's there, it just has to happen. But on new growth bloomers, it's not determined yet. It has to make that new growth, then the bloom buds come out.
So the ice storm that we just had on the old wood bloomers, like a lot of that, you already have the bud forms, are the odds that they're going to be all right?
If they were damaged and broken, you are going to lose some bloom. But if it was just collecting ice, probably won't damage the blooms. Surprisingly enough, like ice or snow cover on a plant acts as a thermal blanket and will actually protect a plant more than it damages unless it gets broken.
So if it's broken, should we go ahead and just trim it now?
Yeah. Yeah, anytime there's dead wood on the plant or damaged wood on a plant, you want to remove that because I sound like a broken record, but it's just going to invite pest and disease in, cause more problems than it would help. Mm-hmm.
And someone said we should have an arborist come out there because you've got this big open wound.
Yeah. And that depends on the size of the tree, for sure. If it's a newly planted small tree, you might be able to trim it yourself, but I would recommend calling an arborist for anything that you feel uncomfortable getting to. Yeah, I would definitely call an arborist. There are some great ones in the city. Davy Tree Company is a very good one. Davy, Davey. Bartlett, they do a ton of research across the country, and they're fantastic with trees, like tree shaping, but also tree health. They would be able to evaluate that and let you know if there's any other major problems going on. And then here locally, I really like, I want to say Page. It's not Page, but it starts with a P. No, Park Company, Parke. They're another really well-equipped tree company. I've had them do work on my property, and they do an excellent job. And I wanted to save a tree, and they were like, "No, there's no saving this tree." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'll trust you." She actually helps me prune things. She's pretty funny. She'll chew on these hydrangea stems, act like she's pruning with me. Excuse me, ma'am. This is Frida, if anybody doesn't know. So this is a good one that the guys brought in because we can talk about deadheading as well as just shaping up. So anytime you're deadheading a plant, you're just taking off the old flowers. You can go right underneath the flower, or you can go back a little bit further to, yeah, still above a node, always above a node, because we don't want to leave any dead wood or wood that becomes dead and becomes a problem. Oh no. Yeah. We've got a crepe myrtle here that I'll prune in a couple of minutes.
Now, is it better or worse to leave those from fall to spring? I read that it's more about just really like aesthetics.
It is. It is an aesthetic choice. I've seen birds like perch on them and take little bits maybe for nesting material. I don't mind the look of them. I think they're really pretty when they collect ice, so I keep mine on. And I'm a lazy gardener, so if I don't have to prune it, I'm not going to. Yeah. Yeah. So this one is very congested inside. This is, what is this? This is one of the paniculata types, and this one in particular is called Bobo. It's a smaller growing one, so it's always going to have a smaller form and probably be a little more congested, but just for the sake of class, I'm going to open it up some.
I have a question about that, because I have some Bobos planted by something, and I have some of the flowers like that, but it shot up tons of just straight sticks, tall, nothing on it.
That is called a water sprout, and I don't remember exactly why they occur, but they're not a good thing. You want to remove them whenever you see them. As far back to the main trunk as you can. Abelia is another one that like happens regularly with. So yeah, whenever you see a straight shoot like that has no natural curve and no leaves or very few leaves, yeah, I would remove that whole thing. Hi, are you helping? You're such a good helper. And sometimes it takes 2 cuts to get a good cut. Two cuts. Like, so on this long branch, if I was going to remove this branch, but I didn't feel like I could make a good cut yet, or if it was very heavy, I would cut some of the weight off and then come in closer to make a good horticultural cut. So that just opened that up. We're going to have more of a candelabra effect. It's going to help these stems become stronger and hold up the blooms more upright. That's another thing. A lot of congested stems will be weaker. They won't be able to get the girth up and really become strong stems. So you might get really floppy plants. So doing this every few years, it doesn't have to be done every year, but just every couple of years going out and thinning out your hydrangeas and picking some of the stronger looking stems to continue on with will help hold up the flowers better.
Is it beneficial after they're done blooming to go in and cut them back down and then you get more blooms throughout the season?
So that's one thing we need to talk about. On the hydrangea, each hydrangea is a little bit different. A lot of the newer, probably all of the new varieties bloom on new and old wood. So you get blooms earlier in the season and then later in the season as well. So if you do deadhead that first crop, it will help the next crop of blooms be bigger, just as pretty and more showy. So, and like we want to strengthen the plant to make them sturdier and hold up the blooms better. So yes, deadheading will help on that first round of blooms. On the second round of blooms, it's just going to be cleanup. It won't force much more bloom later in the season.
You said on newer varieties, are you talking 5 years or 20 years?
Probably in the last 10 years or so. Yeah, maybe even longer than that, but I would say definitely in the last 10 years. There's been a huge influx of hydrangeas in the market lately, and I would say at this point all of them must be the new and old wood. The older fashioned ones, like Nico Blue and even Nantucket, is kind of on that edge of being new and old. It's more of an old wood bloomer than a new wood bloomer. But there's still ones on the market that are just a one-time bloomer, and I tend to like them better. This is going to be a controversial thing, so YouTube, don't get mad at me. But overbreeding does not always make a better plant. So there's a lot on the market, but I would say some of that just has to do with branding and just putting another product out for the year. Not all of it is that much better than what's already out there. And that's a great reason to talk to your local garden center associate, because we have all that information and we can help you pick the best plant for your area. So this one's very congested. There are some very small, flimsy stems in here, so I'm just going to cut this one back. Now, again, this is one that, this is Summer Crush by Endless Summer, so it's a new and old wood bloomer. It's supposed to be a true hot pink flower and maybe edge on purple if it gets a little bit more soil acidifier around it, or if it's in acidic soil, but it's not supposed to go full blue. So like that's where they think the improvement is. I don't care. I am opinionated. So let's just, this is Summer Crush, which is in the Endless Summer series. All the Endless Summer hydrangeas come in that blue pot, so you can always tell them apart. But I'm just going to go in and remove some of the thinner stems. This one's a thick stem, but it just has some little flimsy stuff coming off of it. And then this is a good example. The grower used probably shears to trim this before they were shipped out, but they didn't go in and like really look at what they were trimming. So they've left all this wood on here to be dead wood. So we're just going to go in and clip that out and try to clean that up a little bit. And referring back to that first sheet, you always want to remove crossing branches and things that are just too crowded. So this is getting really crowded. Oh, hi Frida, my baby. And this one I would have pruned back in the fall. I like to do it in like late August or early September, because then they still might get a little flush of growth, but it has plenty of time to harden off and be more frost tolerant before we get into winter. So that is important timing for these guys, because we don't want them to have fresh tender growth going into a freeze, because then we're just going to end up with dead tips on the whole thing and we're going to have to cut everything back again. So we want to do it early enough that new growth will harden off, but late enough so that we don't cut off any flowers that still might be hanging around thinking they're going to show up. And okay, so that will end up being a much nicer, healthier plant next year, and we'll still get some blooms out of it this year because I haven't totally removed all of that good new growth. And as I've been removing leaves, I'm seeing a lot of little pink buds down here, so it's already trying to grow out. This one might have to stay in the greenhouse after this. All right, and then last type of hydrangea is the oak leaf hydrangea. On oak leaves, I would just if you're planting new oak leaves, please talk to a sales associate and find the best oak leaf for your situation. I don't know why, but I hate pruning oak leaves. They have such a beautiful natural form, and I feel like they typically grow in such a nice, pretty shape that they shouldn't need a lot of pruning. So you can absolutely do pruning like we've been talking about, opening them up, shaping them up, removing dead heads, things like that. But if you don't have to, I wouldn't, because they're just so pretty. And I don't see a whole lot that needs to be done with this one, so I am going to leave this one alone today. But again, if pruning needs to be done on these, I would do it in the fall, just to make sure we don't lose any blooms for the next season. And a lot of the newer varieties are new and old, but the older varieties like Alice, and especially some of the big, massive old growers, are just old growth. Yeah. And like every once in a while you get a stray hair that needs to be removed, sure, no problem. But like overall, they just are so graceful that I wouldn't do a whole lot of pruning if it's not necessary. Yeah. Yeah, hydrangeas are great for layering. They'll have really low hanging branches, and you can even just like, well, not that one. But you can take a low one like this, push it down to the ground, put a rock or a brick on top of it. It will create roots under there, and then cut it further back towards the main trunk of the plant, and you have a whole new plant. Right. It needs to be down at least a year, maybe a year and a half, and then you'll have enough of a little root system there to transplant it into a pot or move it somewhere else in the yard. That is plenty of time to make a good root system. Okay. Yeah, we have several different sprays and a granular product called Plant Skid that work very well. But with any of those like sensory things where it's dried blood or it's roasted garlic and sulfur eggs and stuff like that, they're going to get used to it. And you have to switch it a few times a year to keep them disinterested in the plant and keep them away from things. But they work great for a while. I just saw a new thing on Instagram or something where it's like a little stick in the yard and it sends out an electric zap, almost like just a static electricity. And gets them away from the plants that way. And I was like, I might need to look into that because that looks better to me than some things. But in an effort to sell products that we have, our products are fantastic. But like I said, you just have to switch them up every once in a while to keep the deer from getting too used to them.
There's also now a motion sensor, a motion activated.
Hi, are you perfect?
Water that
yes.
You can attach it to your hose and keep it out there, and it only squirts if something large enough walks by.
Yeah, so that's smart. I've heard like pie pans and trees and stuff like that. My dad used to shave Irish Spring soap around our peach tree, and we didn't have any deer, so I don't know what he was doing, but yeah, maybe. But I never saw a deer around our house back there. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of different options out there. The products that we have, I've used them on my hostas, and they do work until they stop. So let's do this pussy willow next. I found this on the back of our lot, and it's really congested, so I'm excited to like open this up and show you guys how it can look. This is a weeping pussy willow, and it's getting ready to bloom for the spring, so this is going to be absolutely gorgeous. But it just needs a little help. It could be way more gorgeous. So we're going to go in, and there are some big crossing branches in here. I don't know. Let me see if I can turn this. Let's lay it down. If you guys can see this, these are rubbing together, and they might even be a little bit joined already. But all of that needs to be removed and cleaned up. So let's get our pruning saw. And I'm going to remove this one here. So we're just... Don't be scared.
It's one of the good reasons to do this early. Like,
Yeah.
the tree is young, so that like, we have noticed the trees that we had pruned over the past couple of years didn't have near the damage or any damage in this ice storm that the ones that have never had it.
Yeah, definitely pruning, especially selective pruning like this, will make a tree sturdier. You're selecting the best branches to stick around and make up the... Oh, I can't talk and prune at the same time. Sorry. But all pruning is in an effort to not only make the tree look better, but make it healthier and stronger in the long run. And Frida is losing her mind.
Was it a little late on that because there's already little buds coming out?
Yeah, it would have probably been better to do this earlier in the dormancy. But this is going to encourage a lot of new growth this year, so that next year the blooms are even more prolific and beautiful. Pussy willows also can be kind of prone to getting powdery mildew. So opening up and having better air circulation within the plant is going to help keep down the fungus problems as well. Okay, so that already took out a big chunk. I'm just going to take out some deadwood things that I see.
That can be true of hydrangea.
When you're pruning bigger branches like this, there is a collar on them, and I think page 3 shows that. At the base of the... Yeah, so where it's showing the pruning saw on the top right corner, it shows a collar of bark at the end of the branch. And you don't want to damage that. You want to cut just outside of that, because that is where all the protocols... I like relate this back to computer systems. I don't know why, because I don't even like computers that much. But all of the information in that collar is geared towards healing the plant. So if that branch falls off, gets cut off, whatever, it's going to start healing that branch. And have you ever looked at a tree, especially like a big old oak tree, where it's got this like puckered little tiny circle? That's where it's lost a branch, and it has rolled this callous bark into the center to cover that up and heal that area. So we don't want to damage that, but we do want to cut as close to that as we can, again, to not leave dead wood that is open to pest and disease. Yeah. Well, the first cut is actually in the middle.
Okay. And how do you cut that?
So the first cut is to help guide the branch where it's going to fall. And then the second cut removes some of that dead wood. And then the final cut is closer to the collar, just as like a cleanup cut. I don't know that the first cut's really needed. I think you can just remove some weight. I guess it depends on how large the tree is, how large the branch is. But really, if we're getting into a cut where we need 3 or 4 cuts to make it safe, then we should be calling a tree company to do it. Okay, so still, this one had a lot of dead around the base. In fact, I'm just gonna...
The dead stuff, like when you're going into approaching this, take out the dead first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Just to...
And it's usually a different color. It's more gray. It's really brittle. It looks shriveled up, so you can kind of tell as you're cutting what what's dead and what's still viable. Okay. Okay, so that's got most of the dead wood out. Now I want to look for crossing branches. This is just too crowded and definitely crosses because it's coming out down, but then it shoots up back through the middle of that, so we're going to remove that. This one now is going through the middle of the whole plant and will create problems, so we'll get rid of that. This one also is just kind of wonky and weird, so you're out.
This is also the time.
Now I just
tree has the ones going straight up off the limb.
Yeah.
We want to take those out too.
Yeah, so if you had a water sucker that was coming straight out like this, I would cut that all the way back to there. But now I'm looking at that and it's coming across the whole thing. So we're maintaining a nice umbrella shape, but we're just opening it up a lot and letting everybody have kind of their own space. I'm gonna take this off. Okay, now that it's open, I can see a little bit more dead wood. So that is about all this one needs, but we won't be able to harvest any branches to bring inside this year to, force indoors in a vase, but it's much healthier and it's going to produce so much more and like really long stems this year because it's not going to have to think about all these little tiny bits that were going on, and it can focus on really good growth this year. So that will make it a lot happier and healthier next year. Okay, let's do Japanese maples and then we'll do crepe myrtle. Suckers, that is on crepe myrtles most of the time. They're little water shoots that come up from the roots or right at the base of the plant. Let's see that off.
Typically, those are the ones that are kind of like straight up.
Yeah. Crepe myrtles are notorious for it. The other plants don't have it nearly as bad. Okay, this one's got all kinds of problems. It's a Japanese maple. This is called Orangeola. It's a beautiful one. But Japanese maples are really prone to bad pruning or no pruning that makes them really congested like this. And I like to just go in and open things up. This one I don't see a lot of dead wood on, so that's good. We can just go ahead and start shaping it. I like, a lot of times I see them pruned into like a perfect umbrella. I like a little bit more natural of a form, so we're not going to do that today, but we will take off some of this lower stuff because it just, there's two, like in this case, there's two branches coming out from the same spot and we don't need that. So we'll clean that up. On this side, this one just doesn't work, in my opinion. Like I said, this is a science and an art. The science part is the good horticultural cuts. The art part is just feelings and vibes.
Also, placement. Like if this was just in your yard and the branches are laying on the ground, you may not want that.
Yeah.
If it's next to a rock wall and flowing over that, that'd be perfect.
Yeah. So just cleaning up some of these little tiny stems on the inside. I like a open Japanese maple where you can really see like the main trunk and all of its beauty. That one came off of the limb and then went back up and like did a U-turn. So that's not useful. We're going to remove that. This end has gotten damaged somehow, so now it's got 4 branches coming out at one spot. So I'm going to, on this one, I'm going to go back up to the next place that a branch is coming out that's nicely shaped and remove all of that. You again? I don't like much of what's happening here. There's some weird angles and really crowded branches, so I'm actually going to remove this whole thing, and I'm going to go with the Loppers this time just to get in and make one smooth cut on that. And a lot of times when I'm pruning in my yard, I carry several different tools with me and keep them around because I'm always switching up, like, you know, which thing is going to work best for this task.
Is there like some kind of thing about just not having super low branches in general, or?
That's almost an aesthetic choice. Again, like Ruthie was saying, like if I had this planted next to a rock wall, I would want some trunk visible during the winter, but then I would definitely leave all of this to like really cascade over it. And none of them are uniform. No Japanese maple, no, most trees are not uniform. But like definitely when you get your tree home, twist it and see which direction it's going to look best before planting it.
Kristen, when you're trying to create a boundary, leave your boundary.
Yeah, if you're trying to block a view of something, you definitely want to leave them. This is coming in really low, but I feel like I need this branch in this space, so we're just going to cut right here and let that start filling in. This is another U-turn branch, so we're going to take that off. Don't like how this one ends, so we'll remove that. And I might just remove this whole thing because I don't love it. So earlier I said, you know, if you feel like you make a mistake in pruning, you can correct it by making a few other prunes so that growth starts coming back into that area. So let's make a mistake.
Hard to think if we're making a mistake.
Right. Maybe we might have to make a mistake on the crepe myrtle. That'll be easier to fix. Now that I've made like cuts, but I should show you how to do it. Okay, well, that's not a mistake. Sorry. Yeah, well, let's do a mistake on the crepe myrtle. It'll be easier. But I mean, on Japanese maples, with anything, you can just shorten up a few things. Also, the way the buds are facing is the way that the branching and leaves are going to come out. So on these buds, they're facing down and away. But then down here, the direction of the buds changes. It's on the opposite side of the stem. So now they're still down and away, but they're in a different direction than those up there. So if you don't want this growth, but you do want this growth, you would cut back up to here. Does that make sense? So as you're pruning, if you have made a mistake and you feel like, okay, well, if I can cut this other branch beside it to help start covering that up, then you can mitigate some of those mistakes that you might have made. And it's just a haircut. They're going to grow back. They're going to do something, so we can fix it. Maybe not immediately, but in future years we can fix things and make it look nice and full and healthy again. Maples, it does. Like this one is starting to do it. Their sap runs a lot. When they start warming up and they push all that sap back up into the tree, they can, if you prune too close to pushing out new growth and that sap is running, it's almost like they'll bleed until they lose energy. So sometimes you get some more dieback on the top. So I would do it when they're fully dormant in the winter, December, probably. I have also done some light pruning on some during the summer while they're in growth and not had any problems with that. But this time of year is probably not the best to do it, even though we're having the class right now. So then on an upright Japanese maple, this is very full through here, and I want to open it up, you know, highlight some of those really pretty branches, correct some of the crossing branches. And Japanese maples aren't necessarily one that needs a central leader to keep it straight and upright. They tend to be prettier when they have kind of a windswept look or, you know, not a perfect shape. But they have started training this one to have a central leader, so we'll do some cleanup up there too. But I'm going to start down here at the bottom. I don't see a whole lot of deadwood on this one. On maples, on the Japanese maples, it's really easy to tell because it turns like bright gray. So there's a huge difference, and it's very obvious. Some of these small branches too, you can almost just like flick them off with your finger. Personally, I don't like this. I like how that's going to open up, so I'm going to take this one off. Duncan's going to kill me. This right here, if you guys can see that, there's like what used to be the main branch, and then these two shoots came off. This one's obviously the more pronounced one, but this in the middle needs to come out, so we're gonna really carefully go in and snip that out. Yeah. No. Okay, so that's a good question. We've had several people in since we had the ice storm with these big breaks and like jagged edges and everything. I'm sorry, Duncan. If you have a branch that breaks off like that and you've got a big jagged edge, if you're able to trim that and get a good clean cut, whether you cut just back to the next node or back to a main branch, and get a nice cut that's angled and all that, I would just clean it up. We've had several people since the storm come in and ask about a tar or a paint to put on there, and you're just as likely to seal in a disease pathogen or some kind of pest and cause more rot and problems as you are to like really protect the tree in that situation. So I would just clean it up as much as possible and then let the tree do its work healing itself. And so we'll just keep thinning. I like to remove a lot of the smaller branches on the inside and lower parts to really open up so that you can see the shape of the trunk. Japanese maples are probably one of my favorite things to prune because you can just do so much with the shape of them. And there's several little branches in there, so I'm going to remove all that, open that up. And I've been known to take a whole day to prune a Japanese maple because I'll do some and then I'll come back and look at it and be like, oh, that's still too thick in there. I need to clean that up, and decided to remove a bigger branch. So pruning is not a 5-minute chore. It's definitely going to take some time and some thought on looks and how you want it to be shaped in the future. And like that branch, I removed this branch, and apparently that was like holding it up behind this other one. So when I did it sprang back out. Well, that shape's now even prettier than I thought it was going to be, but this could become a problem in the future. I might let it go for a year and see what happens and which one I want to remove next year. If this becomes the stronger branch in the better direction, I'll keep it. If this one is, then I'll keep it. So not everything has to be done all at one time. Okay. So there, it's just been cleaned up a little bit. You can see the structure some more. Opened up a little bit, a lot. And then next year we'll do some more on it. Everybody's favorite, crepe myrtles. I love the blooms on crepe myrtles, but I don't like what I see done to them in parking lots and subdivision entrances. They just come in such pretty colors. You can't really beat a crepe myrtle for color in the summertime. So this one is, which one is this? This is Tonto. Crepe myrtle. Yeah, so crepe myrtle is when they go in, they strip off all the small stuff on the bottom and they just cut them all at one level straight across, and they do it every year. So you end up with these big knobs. And there is a type of pruning that you do that. I think it's coppice, and it can be really pretty. It can be beautiful, but the way it's done to crepe myrtles is usually not pretty and not really healthy for the tree either, because all those big knots, it's going to send out tons of new growth from that, but all of that is all those new shoots are very weakly connected to the main trunks, so they're going to be much easier to snap or break in a windstorm and just fall apart. So to give your crepe myrtles really good shape and definition, we want to do selective pruning rather than just crepe myrtle. So again, we look for deadwood first. I don't really see any on here because it would be that brighter gray. And crepe myrtles are another one that will keep their seed heads on through the winter. I think it's pretty. I don't have a problem with it, but if you don't love it, you can get somebody to come out and just deadhead it for you. This variety is Tonto, so it's going to be a hot pink, like a cherry red, and it blooms during the summer. So it's a new growth bloomer. So we can shape it kind of however we want and still get blooms on it next summer. But we want to see the definition of these trunks. So we're going to remove a lot of this little shrubby growth down here at the bottom. These two branches are crossing, they're almost rubbing, so I'm going to remove this one. And actually, I probably should have removed this one, so there's my mistake. This one is going more to the interior of the tree, and this one that I cut was headed out more, so it may have been a better decision to take this one out, but I can correct it by removing the whole thing. So I'm going to go all the way back as far as I can and cut out this one. And now we're back to a little bit prettier vase shape. I'm also going to remove this because this is almost a sucker. It's coming up from the roots and it's not that pretty. I don't think it's going to get into anything pretty, turn into anything pretty. So we've got that. Take out this one, and this one.
So it's new growth, so we're able to do the pruning now on crepe myrtle.
Correct.
Now, or do we wait till after the last frost?
These are totally dormant right now. I wouldn't worry about a lot of sap running in them yet. So these are, you can go home and prune these today if you'd like.
And that's what crepe
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Selective pruning for several years and I would start removing some of those knobs. So like if this one was cut straight across there and you ended up with a big knot of growth, I would consider removing it all the way back to the stem so that you start with a new fresh line, or just come in and again find the direction of the buds. So you want, on a vase shaped plant like this, you always want to be headed outwards. So I think I feel one right here. So we would come in down here and prune there so that that bud is heading new growth out this way. But then you would just want to do selective pruning off of that for the next few years to strengthen that tree and those connections, whatever forms there, and try to start cutting back some of those knobs and get a better looking tree again. And we have, we have landscape services here. Our guys can, our account managers can come out and do a consultation with you and talk about pruning, and either we can do the pruning for you or they may be able to give you some more tips and tricks. Also, if you want to bring in pictures, I'd be happy to show you where I would make cuts to get you started on that road to recovery for your crepe myrtles. This joint here is a really odd one. It's got three, one coming out of the center and then right and left. So I'm gonna take out the center.
Do you take a little bit off of the end of each little branch, like a half inch, to stimulate new growth there?
Not usually, and especially on trees, like you may not be able to get all the way up there, but that's a good point. On a shrub you can, and wherever you prune back to, that first couple of inches at that point is where it's going to send out the most new growth. So if you need to go way far back in the plant to stimulate new growth back here, you would do that. If not, you can just kind of trim up the edges to stimulate just more new growth on the outside. Okay, now that I cut that one back to talk about the crepe myrtle, I don't like this anymore, so I'm going to get this out of the center here. And not every cut is going to be perfect, but just do your best to make those good, clean horticultural cuts. And so there we go. We already have a much more open, natural looking crepe myrtle. It's going to get a ton of new growth on it this year and be even more flowerful than if some of this had stayed, really, because some of that would have been shaded out anyways and not gotten the sun to bloom. So that will be very helpful to this little guy this year. Anybody have any more questions on crepe myrtles?
All those ones where you got branches that have this very short,
Mm-hmm.
they're sitting straight out, you leave those?
I like to start giving it a trunk. So I usually go up a third to halfway to create that trunk look. And then all of this is going to elongate and be where we get blooms from this summer. So I will leave it on this one, and then I might limit up some more next year and clean it up more then. But on crepe myrtles, they are prone to suckering. So removing all of this growth this winter is probably going to send up a lot of little tiny shoots in here. So this spring I'll have to go in and weed those out and clean that up as it's growing so that that doesn't steal energy from where I really want it to be. All right. And then the last thing that I really wanted to talk about today was conifers. We've got an arborvitae in here with us for this part. And let me turn it around this way, actually. Conifers are a whole different beast. They, where deciduous plants and even the evergreens like the boxwoods and yews, if you cut them into the inside, they will regenerate. They've got what's called latent buds under the bark, and sun will hit those and they'll immediately spark into life and start growing. I mean, it's not like immediate, but you know what I'm saying. On conifers, if you cut into an area past the green growth into just stem, it doesn't regenerate very well. So if a branch gets broken, I would recommend just going as far as you can, like as close as you can to the next trunk and giving it a clean cut there, because they don't regenerate nearly as well as a deciduous plant. So whenever you are pruning them, you want to stay in the green. So on this, we would just shape it up, and like it's got a weird little curve here. So I would cut that, maybe cut it to where it's going to be straight again. This green growth will keep going. Check. But if we had cut it back into that brown area past the green growth, it's not going to regenerate well and regrow and fill back in. So we always want to make sure we stay in the green on conifers. Yes, ma'am.
If we have one with this form that made it go into a right angle, is it really just best to?
It's just bent right now. Not necessarily. So I would give it some more time. I would give it really several weeks to start waking back up. Now that you can, but I would even wait to do that a little bit longer. I would see how much it corrects itself over the next few weeks as it's warming up and the sap starts running in the plants, and as it's getting ready to put on new growth. But then at that point, if it's still really bent over and not corrected itself well, I would stake it then. Yeah. Well, I would, if the root ball is exposed, I would stake it now. Just pull it back into place and go ahead and give it that stake to get those roots back underground. But I would give it a little while to see if it's going to recover or if it's toast. I mean, it's entirely possible that it is, but if it's already there, you know, and you don't mind giving it a shot for a little while, I would give it a shot. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I know some HOAs are really strict about, you know, how things look on the front of the house. So if it's on the front of your house, like, it might not be worth the hassle of trying to explain to them that you're saving your plant. But I would always try to say something before, unless I just really hate it, which has happened. So that's all I had in my mind to talk about today. Do you guys have more questions? Yes. Let me get it up here on the table. So if it's in your yard and it's looking like this, again, removing the dead wood just so we don't invite pests and disease in. So cleaning this up, just kind of thinning it out. And every year the arborvitaes do shed. Most conifers do when they're getting new growth. Or, I mean, they seem to do it twice a year, really, spring and fall. So any of this that is dead inside that you can shake out, or take your leaf blower to the plant and rake it out, whatever you need to do to get some of that out of there, that will help. This will just decay and add moisture and fungal problems into the center of the plant. So any of that removal would be good for it. But again, this dead wood, just cut it back as close as you can to the trunk just to give it a cleaner look. But and getting more sunlight in there will help, but they don't regenerate very well or very quickly, so you may end up with a dead spot, and in that case that's a gardening opportunity. We plant another shrub in front of it to disguise that. Yes, conifers are dormant even though they're evergreen. So now's a fine time to clean them up and make decisions about their health as well. You're welcome.
The only other thing I was just going to mention
Yes.
is we are in a captive area here. Our plants are all inspected and everything. When you're in your yard, clean your pruners.
Oh yeah, I didn't tell you about that. Especially if you're going from something you know has a disease to something that is healthy. Dip your pruners in a 10% bleach solution, or even like Lysol or Clorox wipes on them helps prevent transfer of pathogen from plant to plant. Yes, I have. That works as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just spray it on there and let it soak for a minute, and then you're ready to go. Off and running again.
I have two figs. One's a brown turkey and the other's Celeste.
Uh-huh.
And they've gone through, they seem to be cyclical, but they're just so clogged up now. And I'm assuming that I really just, a lot of times, the old stuff will die back on its own. And try and get all that out of there, but determining, I'm assuming most of the same things, because it's basically I'm trying to make sure I have some fruit.
Right. So, like the youngest branches don't produce, I don't think, but like the middle-aged branches do. So you do want to remove the oldest, thickest ones, and that thinning example in the pamphlet will help you do that. You want to keep like 2 and 3 year limbs and cut out some of the really thick ones at the base. And I would just go as close as you can to the center. Figs get really tight in there at the crown of the plant, so you're not going to be able to get all the way down. You may not be able to make the best cuts in there, but just do what you can to thin it out and give it some good airflow and sunlight getting in there, and you should have healthy figs again.
Well, they fruited. I mean, they put very small, but nothing like it.
Oh.
On the Celeste.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this will help, and who knows, the weather and rain, lack of rain, all the rain, we get such a weird cycle here. So
I also wonder, like, I know on some fruit, I've only grown fig and I have not been successful, but on some fruit, it does help to like pick off some of the fruits to encourage the other ones to get larger and ripen. I don't know if that's a situation. That might be something.
yeah, I know citrus is like that. Yeah. So that might be something to consider too, especially if you see a lot of blooms and a lot of fruit producing. Peonies, they're like that too. You want to take off some of the side buds so that the central bud can get really big and pretty. Yeah, for sure.
On this picture, it's got girdling roots.
Yes.
Remove. I don't know what that.
Let's see. Do we have? Okay. Let me pull out this pussy willow tree again.
What was the question?
About girdling roots. On that first sheet, it shows a an example at the very bottom about removing girdling roots along with your suckers. And that, let me put this up here. And if you guys want to come gather around, I don't think I can carry this around to everybody. But a girdling root would be a root that you can see the root flare on healthy trees. You want to keep the soil away from that root flare and let that be like its natural shape into the ground. But a girdling root would come off the trunk, but then hang a right or a left and immediately start wrapping back around the plant. And it can actually girdle the trunk of the tree and reduce or stop all nutrients from going up and down through that side of the trunk. So if you see that happening, you want to cut that. You want to, like, if this was girdling, we would want to cut that root and try to remove it from the wrapping around the tree and causing that disruption of service. This one is okay. Most of these look good because they're coming out and going out towards the edge of the pot. I don't see any that are particularly wrapping here, but just, yeah, as an example, I pulled that one off. But you would want to be looking for ones that immediately cut back around and really start girdling the tree. Okay, anything else I can help with?
I have a first year climbing rose that's halfway up the arbor. I read two different things. One, you cut it chest height, another one, you just thin it.
Yeah.
What would you do with a first year climber?
I have a second year Peggy Martin climber, and the first year we just thinned it. In the place that we put it, I didn't feel the need to just cut it off at chest height. I want it to get really big and ramble, and it felt like it was a very healthy plant, so I didn't feel like I needed to do that drastic of a removal and like kind of start over with it. So I just thinned.
I still have green leaves.
I do too.
So that's why I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I might take all of that when it's already over the top.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When we're talking about yews, what about like the palm yews? They don't need much trimming or...
They don't. They're like the oak leaf hydrangeas. They have such a pretty graceful shape. I would just,
leave them alone?
yeah, let them do their thing as long as they're not encroaching on anybody else.
I
And
did find a few little dead ones last year. I haven't looked at them
yeah.
since the ice storm.
Yeah.
I don't want to look.
No, I'm kind of
scared
afraid to
go out
look.
there and look right now.
Yeah. Yeah, but just removing dead wood, removing odd wild hairs if needed on those.
That's what I thought, because we're new to all, that and several of those plants.
Yeah.
It's all new to us, and so this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
There again, right plant, right place. Will cut down on a lot of your pruning chores. So as you plant new plants, make sure that we're doing the research and